The first thing that went wrong was not a blackout. It was the opposite. At 2:17 in the morning, the regional grid gained load from a district that had no live feeders, no active substations, no registered customers, and no physical connection we could identify. 37 megawatts appeared on the board like someone had turned on a small city beneath the dark. The map showed nothing there but condemned streets, empty lots, and an industrial zone that had been cleared 12 years earlier. Then one of the phone lines rang. The caller ID displayed a substation name that had been demolished before I started the job. I worked as a grid operations analyst at the North Valley Regional Control Center for 9 years. Most people imagine power grid work as dramatic, full of alarms and emergency decisions. But most nights were quiet in a way that made the building feel detached from the rest of the world. The control center sat behind a service road outside the city, a low concrete structure with tinted windows, backup generators, microwave dishes, and a parking lot that always looked too large after midnight. Inside, the air was cold, dry, and constant. Fluorescent lights hummed over rows of consoles. The main wall displayed the regional network in colored lines and numbered blocks, every feeder, transformer bank, switching yard, and high-voltage tie rendered into something neat enough to be trusted. That was the part people outside the job rarely understood. A grid is not just wires. It is balance. Generation, load, frequency, voltage, demand, reserve margin, switching status. Every second, the system is correcting itself. Too much draw in one place matters. Too little generation matters. A bad reading can be a sensor fault. A real reading can become a disaster if you assume it is false. So when the load appeared from Zone 14, none of us panicked. Not at first. Zone 14 was an old industrial district on the eastern edge of our territory. It used to hold cold storage warehouses, machine shops, textile plants, and 2 plating facilities before the city bought most of the land for redevelopment. By the time I worked nights, the area was mostly fenced lots and broken roads. The feeders that once served it had been retired. The main substation, East Harlow, had been decommissioned, stripped, and removed. On our operating map, Zone 14 was gray. Gray meant no active distribution assets. At 2:17 a.m., it lit up amber, 37 megawatts. Not a flicker, not a spike, a clean, stable load. The system tagged it as unassigned consumption. My supervisor that night, Marquez, rolled his chair closer to my console and stared at the number without speaking. "Meter aggregation error?" he asked. That was my first thought. I checked the SCADA feed, then the redundant feed, then the historian logs. The value was present in all 3, recorded with matching timestamps. Frequency dipped by a measurable amount when the load appeared, then stabilized as automatic generation control compensated. That was the part that bothered me. A bad number does not pull on the grid. This one did. We called the field dispatcher. He checked switching status. No feeders had been closed into Zone 14. No crew had reported an accidental backfeed. No temporary service permits were active. No emergency generator intertie had been scheduled. By 2:24, the load was gone. No ramp down, no breaker event. It simply stopped. The board returned to gray. Marquez told me to mark it for engineering review, and I did. I wrote the kind of note that sounds harmless later. Possible phantom load. Verify meter mapping. No customer impact. The next night, it happened again. 2:17 a.m., 37 megawatts. Same duration. 7 minutes, same zone. This time, I was ready for it. I had a diagnostic screen open before the value even stabilized. I watched voltage readings shift across surrounding substations. Not enough to trip anything, but enough to prove the load was real somewhere. The neighboring feeders leaned toward it like weight on a cable. Then the phone rang. It was an old internal line mounted near the switching desk. We still had several of them, hardwired circuits used before the modern call system. Most were dead or used only during drills. The display read, East Harlow Substation. Marquez looked at it, then at me. "Don't answer it," he said, too quickly. But he answered it himself. He listened for 5 seconds. His expression changed in a way I had never seen before. Not fear, exactly. Recognition, maybe. Or the sudden memory of something he had hoped was gone. He hung up without saying anything. What was it? I asked. Line noise. But the next morning, when I pulled the call recording, it was not line noise. It was a room tone, a deep electrical hum, distant relay chatter, the sound of old ventilation. And underneath it, very faint, someone breathing close to the receiver, no voice, just breath. The engineering review started unofficially. That is how most troubling things begin in operations. Nobody wants to escalate until they know what they are looking at. We checked meter IDs first. A corrupted mapping table could assign consumption to the wrong district, but the load was not coming from an active customer account. It had no billing endpoint, no transformer group, and no service address. We checked telemetry. No remote terminal unit reported sending it. We checked historical archives. That was when things became harder to dismiss. Zone 14 had not been entirely quiet after decommissioning. There were scattered records going back years, unexplained nighttime demand, short duration, always between 2 and 3 a.m. Most were dismissed as meter errors. One engineer in 2016 had flagged the pattern and requested a field audit. The audit was canceled after redevelopment work began. There was one note attached to the archive. Do not autocorrect East Harlow Legacy Load Group. Preserve original association. No signature, no explanation. I printed it and brought it to Marquez. He stared at the page longer than he needed to. Where did you find this? Archive Group EHN4. That archive was supposed to be migrated. It was. He folded the paper once and put it in his pocket. That should have been the moment I stopped asking questions. But the problem with grid work is that unexplained things do not remain private. They touch equipment, they affect balance, they leave traces. On the fourth night, the load increased. Not by much, 39 megawatts. The map stayed amber for 9 minutes. During those 9 minutes, 2 customer outage calls came in from neighborhoods bordering Zone 14. Not power loss, not flickering lights. The callers said their lights had become too bright. One man reported that every LED bulb in his kitchen was glowing even after the wall switch was off. Another said his electric meter was running backward. Both calls were logged as service quality complaints. At 2:26, when the unknown load vanished, the complaints stopped. The next day, I drove out to Zone 14 on my own time. That was not forbidden. Field visits happened. Analysts sometimes needed to understand topology beyond a screen. But I did not tell Marquez because I already knew he would say no. The old industrial district was worse than I expected. The city had cleared most of the buildings, but not cleanly. Foundations remained. Chain-link fences sagged around lots filled with weeds. Concrete loading docks stood without warehouses behind them. The streets were still there, cracked and pale, with faded lane markings leading nowhere. East Harlow substation had been at the corner of Mercer and 9th. I found the lot. Empty. No transformers, no steel structures, no control house, just gravel, weeds, and a rectangular slab surrounded by rusted fence posts. But near the back of the lot, half buried in dirt, I found a cable marker. EHS control. The plastic was sun-faded and split, but the letters were readable. I took a photo. Then I noticed something else. The gravel around the slab was warm, not hot, not steaming, just warmer than the surrounding ground, as if a machine had recently been running beneath it. I stood there with traffic faint in the distance and listened. There was no sound at first. Then, through the soles of my shoes, I felt a vibration. A low, steady pulse, like a transformer under load. That night, I checked the board before 2:17. Zone 14 was gray. At 2:16, 1 minute early, the old phone rang, East Harlow substation. Nobody answered. At 2:17, the load appeared, 42 megawatts. This time, something new came with it. A status indication flashed briefly on our switching diagram. Not on any active feeder, not on any line still in service. It appeared in a layer of the map that should no longer have existed. Breaker 14.6 closed. Then, breaker 14.7 closed. Then, bus energized. Marquez swore under his breath and opened a maintenance interface I had never seen before. What is that? I asked. Old display layer. Why is it still connected? It isn't. But it was responding. On the wall map, beneath the modern grid, the outline of an older network began to appear in faint gray lines, streets that no longer existed, feeders removed before I joined the company, a substation symbol at East Harlow, then a load block formed around it, not labeled Zone 14, labeled Harlow Residential East. I knew that name from nowhere. I searched it in the customer database. No result. I searched the document archive. One result appeared. Urban Clearance Study, 1983. The file was scanned poorly but readable. Before the industrial district, before the warehouses, that land had been a residential neighborhood, Harlow East, 3,000 people. Removed for an expansion project that was later canceled, then replaced by industry. I scrolled through old diagrams, demolition schedules, and relocation maps. Then I found a utility survey. Harlow East had once consumed between 35 and 40 megawatts during winter peak, the same amount now appearing on our board. I remember sitting there, hearing the control room around me, keyboards, HVAC, distant radio chatter, the soft alert tones from other desks. Everything ordinary continued. That made it worse. A few nights later, we sent a crew. Officially, they were checking for illegal taps and buried conductive faults near the old site. 2 linemen, 1 relay technician, and a safety observer. They arrived just before midnight. Their truck camera streamed to our console. The lot looked empty under the headlights. They tested voltage at old duct bank access points. Nothing. They scanned for magnetic fields. Nothing unusual. Ground temperature slightly elevated near the slab, which they attributed to underground steam leakage, even though no steam line was mapped there. At 2:17, the unknown load appeared. The crew's radio cut out. On the truck camera, every streetlight in the dead district came on. There were no streetlights in that district, not anymore. But the video showed them clearly. A row of yellow sodium lamps stretching down Mercer Street, illuminating sidewalks that no longer existed, parked cars that were not on the modern aerial maps, and houses where empty lots should have been. The crew did not move. One of the linemen whispered, "Control, are you seeing this?" We were. Then the camera glitched, and for 6 seconds the image showed a different angle. Not the truck, not the lot. It showed the inside of a substation control room. Old panels, analog meters. A wall clock stopped at 2:17. A rotary phone on a metal desk. The receiver lifted by itself. The feed snapped back to the truck. At 2:26, the streetlights went dark. The crew returned without finishing the inspection. The official report blamed camera compression artifacts, radio interference, and misidentified municipal lighting from adjacent streets. None of us believed it. After that, Marquez stopped pretending. He called me into a conference room with no windows and told me East Harlow had been a problem before. Not often, not predictably, but enough that older operators knew not to merge its archive layers into the current system. Enough that some data was left untouched because every attempt to clean it created new readings. "What is drawing the power?" I asked. He rubbed both hands over his face. "That's the wrong question. What's the right one?" He looked at the dark window reflecting our faces back at us. "What is the grid still connected to?" The final incident happened during a heat wave. Regional demand was already high. Every generator was committed. We had rolling reserve, but not much. A storm line was moving in from the west, and the control room had that tight, silent feeling operators get when everyone knows the margin is thin. At 2:17, Zone 14 appeared. Not 40 megawatts, 112. Alarms came up across the board. Voltage sagged on the eastern feeders. Capacitor banks switched in automatically. A transformer at North Mercer began heating faster than expected. Then the old map layer opened by itself. Not faint this time, bright, detailed. Harlow Residential East filled the wall display as though it were still part of the service territory. Feeder names populated. Customer blocks appeared, transformer numbers, street circuits, load estimates, every one of them active. The phone rang. Marquez did not stop me this time. I answered. For a moment I heard the same hum, the same ventilation, then a woman spoke. Her voice sounded close, tired and practical, like someone calling after a long wait. "Control, this is East Harlow. We are still showing low voltage on Mercer. Do you want us to shed residential?" I did not answer. She repeated the question. Behind her, I heard other phones ringing, voices, footsteps, the clack of switches, a working control room. Marquez whispered, "Hang up." But I couldn't, because on the wall display, one of the active feeders had begun pulling more load than the rest. Feeder 14.9, Mercer South. I checked the old records. Mercer South served 6 blocks that had been cleared in 1983. The woman on the line said, "Control, we need instruction." I asked the only question I could think of. "Who is this?" There was a pause. Then she said my full name. Not my first name, not my last name. My full legal name, exactly as it appeared in the employee directory. "You are the assigned analyst," she said. "We have been waiting for confirmation." The eastern grid frequency dipped. A real dip, a dangerous one. We had seconds before automatic protection started shedding actual customers. Marquez reached over me and opened a manual command window. He selected the legacy load group, the one no one was supposed to touch. East Harlow Network Association. He typed disconnect. A warning appeared. Removing association may affect dependent service. He clicked confirm. The wall display froze. The woman on the phone stopped breathing. For 1 second, the entire control room seemed to lose sound. Even the HVAC. Even the alarms. Then every screen went black. Emergency lighting came on. When the systems rebooted, Zone 14 was gray. The load was gone. So was East Harlow. Not just from the live map, from the archive. Every file I had opened was missing. The 1983 study, the survey, the old feeder diagrams, the call recordings, the inspection footage, the note telling us not to autocorrect the association, gone. Marquez retired 3 months later. I transferred to planning, then left the utility 2 years after that. Officially, the incident was recorded as a control system failure during high-demand conditions. No customers lost service long enough to require public reporting. The field crew footage was classified as corrupted. The old phone line was removed. I kept only one thing, the photo I took at the empty East Harlow lot. I have looked at it more times than I should. Most of the image is ordinary: gravel, weeds, cracked concrete, rusted fence posts. But in the far background, beyond the slab, there is a row of houses. Small houses, porch lights on, cars parked along a clean street. I know they were not there when I took the picture. Last year, I checked the regional demand records out of habit. I don't have access to the internal system anymore, but public load reports still show hourly totals. At 2:17 a.m. on the anniversary of the incident, regional demand rose by 37 megawatts for 7 minutes. No outage report, no explanation. Just a small rise in the dark from a place the grid insists is empty. And somewhere beneath that empty lot, something still knows how to ask for power.